Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're jumping into a huge question, maybe the question. Why do we do the things we do? We're going to explore the 8 different lenses psychologists use to understand our thoughts, feelings, and actions.
So let's start right there, with that universal question. I mean, it's at the very heart of what it means to be human, right? From the huge life choices we make down to our tiny, everyday habits, what's really driving our behavior?
Well, the field that's dedicated to answering that exact question is psychology. It's the science of trying to systematically study our minds and our actions, to figure out the patterns and the rules that govern our inner and outer worlds.
Now, to understand something as incredibly complex as human behavior, a single explanation is just never gonna cut it. Instead, psychologists use what you can think of as a toolkit filled with different analytical lenses or perspectives. Each one gives us a unique and really valuable point of view.
Okay, so here are the main tools in that toolkit, just at a glance. You'll see these 7 core ideas can be kind of grouped together. Some are all about our internal world, like the psychodynamic lens, digging into our unconscious, or the cognitive lens that's focused on our thoughts. Then you've got others that look at external forces, like behaviorism, which studies what we can actually see, and the sociocultural view, which looks at our environment. And of course, we'll get into how our very biology and our deep evolutionary past play a massive role. We'll unpack all of these, and then we'll see how one final, 8th framework brings them all together.
And here's a pretty cool trick to help you remember these. You can actually use your own hand as a memory aid. So, your thumb, pointing back over your shoulder, can stand for the psychodynamic view of our past. Your index finger, pointing to your head, that's perfect for the cognitive perspective. Your middle finger? Well, you can use that for behaviorism and how we sometimes react against the rules. The whole point is to create a physical link to each idea, which makes them way easier to remember.
Okay, definitions are one thing, but let's actually see these lenses in action. We're going to check out a few case files to see how each perspective explains real-world behavior.
So, our first case file. This is about a really powerful and universal behavior, that distress a baby feels when a parent just leaves the room. This isn't something that happens in just one culture, it happens pretty much everywhere. So what's the logic behind such a deep-seated reaction?
So how would we explain this if we looked back way back? Not just to childhood, but to the entire history of our species. What if this fear wasn't something that was learned, but something that was inherited?
And that's a perfect example of the evolutionary lens. It argues that way back when, infants who cried when they were separated were more likely to be protected, to get fed, and to ultimately survive long enough to pass on their own genes. So that anxiety we see, it's like an echo of a powerful, life-saving instinct from our deep, deep past.
Okay, next up, a totally different kind of case. Here, we have an adult who, for what seems like no reason, keeps undermining her own romantic relationships. The big clue? A really painful event from her past. Her father left the family when she was young. So, where do we even start to look for the connection?
The cause here isn't obvious, and she's not even aware of it. So, which tool in our kit is designed to dig into those hidden drivers, those unresolved issues from our early years that are running the show just below the surface? That is the job of the psychodynamic perspective. It would say this self-sabotage isn't random at all. It's being driven by an unconscious fear of repeating that past trauma. By pushing her partners away, she's actually, without knowing it, trying to control the situation and protect herself from being abandoned all over again.
Now, let's switch gears and look at a case that's not about fixing problems from the past, but about building a better future. We have a client who feels totally stuck and unhappy in their job. The therapist's goal is to help them figure out what they truly want and who they can become.
So, which psychological approach is all about our natural drive to grow, to make conscious choices for ourselves, and to really strive to become our best, most authentic selves? This is the humanistic lens in action. It's really less about what's wrong with you and more about what's possible for you. The focus is squarely on the individual's unique potential, their freedom to choose their own path, and their built-in ability for personal growth and fulfillment.
All right, our next case file takes us into a classroom. We've got a student who's being disruptive. The teacher tries something simple, a gold star for good behavior. And what do you know, pretty soon, the disruptive behavior starts to fade away.
So, which perspective couldn't care less about unconscious drives or feelings of self-worth, but is totally focused on what can be seen and measured? Which theory explains this change as just a direct result of feedback from the environment?
That is classic behaviorism. From this point of view, behavior is simply learned from direct consequences. The gold star is a reward that reinforces the good behavior, which makes it more likely to happen again. You see this principle absolutely everywhere, from training your dog to parenting to the bonus systems at big companies. Our final case file takes us inside the mind of an athlete who completely freezes up before big competitions. The therapist isn't focused on her past or on some reward system. Instead, they're looking at the specific thoughts that are running through her head right before she has to perform. Which lens argues that it's not the competition itself that's causing the anxiety, but how we think about it. Which part of our toolkit focuses on our internal monologue, the stories we tell ourselves and our core beliefs? This is the cognitive lens at its absolute best. The therapist helps the athlete first identify and then challenge her automatic negative thoughts. You know, things like, I'm definitely going to fail. By changing the thought process, she can change her emotional reaction and ultimately her performance. So we've seen 5 different lenses explain 5 different behaviors. But what happens when we try to understand a complex person, a whole person? The reality is, no single lens is ever going to be enough. Think about it like this. Each perspective is kind of like looking at a diamond from just one angle. You see a specific, really clear facet. But to actually appreciate the whole diamond, you have to turn it over and see how all the different facets work together to create that brilliance. It's the exact same for understanding a person. And this whole idea of combining lenses leads us to the most comprehensive, modern framework in psychology, the biopsychosocial perspective. It's less of a single lens and more like a master lens, our 8th and final concept. It's designed to pull all the others together to give us the most complete picture possible. So here's how it works. It weaves together 3 absolutely critical threads. First, our biology. That's our genes, our brain chemistry, our hormones. Second, our psychology. Our thoughts, our emotions, our learned fears, drawing from lenses like the cognitive and psychodynamic ones. And third, our social-cultural world, the influence of our family, our society, our friends. To truly understand someone, you really have to look at all 3. Okay. So now that we've explored this entire toolkit, it's your turn to put it to use. Because the real power of understanding all these perspectives is being able to apply them to your own life and your own experiences. So here's a final challenge for you. Think about a habit that you have. It could be a good one, a bad one, doesn't matter. Now try to look at it through these different lenses. Is it just a learned behavior? That's the behavioral view. Is it a product of your thoughts? That's cognitive. Or is it maybe tied to something deep in your past? The psychodynamic lens. You know, the truth is, it's probably a mix of your biology, your personal history, and your social world. The real power here isn't about finding the one perfect answer, it's about knowing which questions to ask. Thanks for watching.